I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to come and contribute today. And I'm sorry that Alan Beath is not here. Actually, he's, as you know, apart from a very long-standing expert in justice matters, he's chair of the Justice Select Committee. There's currently a Justice Select Committee inquiry into youth justice going on, so the committee's been meeting for probably 6-7 months and visiting sites and so on, and I'm giving evidence to the committee on the 11th of December. I'm rather hoping, I mean, having seen some rather challenging Select Committee sessions recently, not justice but other areas, I'm rather hoping I will get the treatment that some participants have been doled out. And I think that's probably not going to be the case, because there are some significant achievements in youth justice to build on. So what I want to do today is outline where we are in the youth justice system at the moment, but also talk about the things that still have to be done, because, not surprisingly, there's still a big agenda. The youth justice system obviously is a good place to start this conference, because it is the preventive arm of the justice system. And whilst youth is a very relatively small part of the system, it is really, really important, because if we don't get things as right as we can at this point in dealing with young people, then we're going to have much bigger issues in the adult justice system later in the line. Last year there were about, 2010-11, there were about 170,000 offences committed by young people. That's young people up to the age of 17, so 10 to 17, because 10 is the age of criminal responsibility in England and Wales. And there were about 85,000 young people involved in those offences. So, you know, quite significant numbers and very, very important part of the system. And the place that youth justice holds is quite different really from adult justice, because we operate at the kind of balancing point between the welfare system and the justice system. And very often people say to me, well, YJB, Youth Justice Board, are you work for welfare or are you for justice? And of course it's a quite ridiculous question, so hopefully nobody here will ask it, because it's about both. I mean, we are dealing with children, they're under 18, so they're children in law, and subject to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which the government acknowledges as being very important. But at the same time, if young people offend, then there's a need for justice, they need to be called to account in whatever's the most appropriate way. And for every child who offends, there's a victim. So, you know, there is no choice between children or justice, welfare and justice. It's something that has to be managed within a successful youth justice system. So first of all, just like to look at the role of the Youth Justice Board, which was established in 1998. And the reason it was established was because youth justice at the time was chaotic, really. Young people were waiting a very long time before they came to court for offences. There were situations occasionally where there was nowhere to place them in custody if the courts decided they should go there. And there was no effective integration across the services locally to make sure young people were dealt with properly. And so there was a big reform, a major reform. We're now 14 years on, and I think we can say we can see some of the results have started to pay off quite considerably. And our role is to advise the Secretary of State, to monitor the performance of the youth justice system. We commission research and publish data, and we identify and promote effective practice. And separately, a bit later on, in the year 2000, the Youth Justice Board was given the responsibility of bringing together a whole range of disparate sectors so that we could try to make more coherent the secure estate, which is where young people are held in custody. So quite a significant range of responsibilities. And then just quickly looking, because some of you will know this, but not everyone does, and even those people who are involved day to day in aspects of the adult justice system don't always know quite how the youth justice system works. It is a very hidden system. I think that's one of our challenges, and actually a responsibility for us to try and do more about, but it is quite hidden. So we've got the board, which is an overarching, I suppose in a sense, a commissioner really across the community and the president. But we have a very dispersed and devolved delivery system, rightly so, 158 youth offending teams. And these are multi-agency teams, and they have been really successful, and it's really pleasing that all political parties acknowledge the success of the youth offender team model, which doesn't mean to say, of course, that we've cracked youth crime, youth justice, but they have made huge progress, and because they operate as multi-agency teams, they were amongst the first to really deliver in that way, including obviously health, probation, police, major partnerships locally which have worked together on the issue of youth justice. Also, children's services in each local area is a key part of the youth justice system. We have specialist youth courts in the magistrates, we have specialist judges working for youth courts as well. The police, obviously, absolutely key, the Crown Prosecution Service, and we have about 25 secure accommodation providers. Well, perhaps we haven't got 25 providers, but we've got 25 units. So that's what makes up the youth justice system. And there have been many achievements. I won't spend long on this because we really concentrate most on what we need to do next. But there has been a massive reduction in the number of first-time entrants, and that's been achieved. That's a really important measure because it shows the number of young people who end up in front of the courts, really. And it used to be a very big number, and it was bogging the whole of the service down by dealing with children who really didn't need an awful lot more than a good telling off and a kind of, you know, being brought up short for what they've done. Getting the parents in, getting the school involved, those things. Now we've got down to the children who do need much more attention. And that's been done really by a really good joint work at local level with the police and by providing ways of dealing with children who commit minor offences at early stages which divert them for the court, and most of them don't come back, and that's a really good way of dealing with it. There's also been a reduction in the frequency with which young offenders actually re-offend. 90% over 10 years, that's good news, but obviously we'd like it to be more. And there's been a massive reduction in the number of young people in custody. I'll come back to that in a minute because it's a really important statistic. There were a very large number of young people 4 years ago in custody who did not need to be there, for whom a community sentence, a very intensive community sentence, was completely appropriate and quite safe for the public. And we've managed to do an awful lot about that. And of course that has saved a great deal of money, and we've decommissioned about 1,000 places in custody. But as you'll see from the bottom of this slide, reoffending rates, that's what you might call the yes-no rate. Do they reoffend or don't they reoffend within 12 months, remain high. On average, 35% of young people going into criminal justice reoffend, and that rate is far higher for those who go to custody. It's about 71%. So, not surprisingly, it's a very high priority for the government that we make more inroads into that. And very briefly, I want to run through some headings of the things that are going on now, which are really important and ought to deliver, we're reasonably confident will deliver some results. There's the Legal Aid Sentencing Punishment of Offenders Act. I think you'll probably have this mentioned later on today in other respects, but there are key elements of that related to youth justice coming into effect about now. There is the potential for payment by results, which of course the government is very committed to. The issue of serious youth violence in gangs is one that causes us probably the most concern, now that many other things have been improved quite significantly. We want to make the youth custody for young people much more cost effective, and we've got quite exciting really, new developments really. Whatever your views about police and crime commissioners, we have them. And they're going to be a really important part of what happens in youth justice in the future, I think. And then we want to improve the transition of young people to the adult system at 18, and we've been doing a lot of work on that. So I just want to cover some of these things so that you get a kind of flavour of what's going on across the system. The Legal Aid Sentencing and Punishment of Offenders Act is a really important piece of legislation because it does three important things for us in youth justice. First of all, it brings together what we call the out-of-court disposals regime. So that's how we deal with young people when they're at the beginning stages. How do we keep them out of court if that's appropriate? What do we do in terms of restorative disposal, with restorative justice approaches, or reparation, or anything that will actually keep a young person out of the court, so that it's not necessary to get them in at that early stage. It pays off enormously. All the research shows that if you can keep a child out of the courts, obviously if they commit serious offences that's not possible, but if they commit minor offences, they need to get straight into what it is behind their behaviour, what can be done to support them, their families and so on, to make sure that they don't reoffend and they're not going to be part of continuing sort of ratcheting up. Our previous system has an escalator element. You know, if you come in later on, you may have committed a more serious offence, then you come back and you commit a minor offence. We used to have to kind of go on an escalator. Now there's a much more flexible system, and the police and the youth offending teams will be working together to make sure that the young people are on that system at the right place, so we can deal appropriately with each child. And also it's going to be a national system which is agreed across the whole of England and Wales in a way that means that we have less variety across different areas, which can be unfair. So that's a really good improvement. Making restorative justice a priority, the government's very, very committed to this. I mean, we have been very keen on restorative justice elements of the youth justice system for some time, but it's really good that the government is really behind this, because what the government has said is they want restorative justice to be an element of justice at any point in the system, early on when a child commits a minor offence, right up to where they have committed a serious offence, where it's appropriate, where the victim is willing to be involved. Then all the evidence shows that it's extremely beneficial from a victim's point of view, and it certainly is from a young person's point of view. For many of them, it's the hardest thing they've ever had to do, is to face the victim and understand what their action has meant to a victim. So it's a really important move, and there's a lot more involvement of restorative elements in the system in the future, and that's really good. And finally on this, there's new secure remand arrangements. This is a very important element of the system. About 350 children on any day today are in custody on remand. That means they've been accused of an offence, and the courts have decided that it was sufficiently serious, or there's some other reason why they must be held in custody awaiting their trial. The really worrying thing has been that 60% of those children subsequently either get found not to be guilty or they don't get a custodial sentence. So we've been holding children in custody, and sometimes quite young children, when they should never really have been there. Now these measures will make that much more unlikely to happen. Local authorities are going to start to bear directly the costs of secure remands, and what that will do is it will encourage local authorities to look much more carefully about the children who are in this category, about what they're doing to support them, what actually they're doing to wrap around them, to try and help them get to the bottom of why they're offending and what can be done to stop it. And this is, local authorities, whilst obviously they're cautious about the financial implications of this, they generally now welcome this approach. And it is a forerunner potentially to long-term devolving the whole of the youth custody budget to local government, which is a very radical step, but one that we feel in the Youth Justice Board is a good idea. So there is potential for payment by result in the youth justice system. We have a major sums of money going from us to youth offending teams, and we're working with youth offending teams now to think about, could the money, or some of the money they get from us, which is only a part of what they spend, local authorities pay the most of it, could we link it to particular outcomes? So we're working with them on that to try and find ways that might work. But I'm glad to say that the government recognises the progress that's been made in youth justice, and are happy to let us work with the Ministry of Justice and with the youth offending teams to work out what would be a good improvement by using payment by results. And for secure estate providers, in future we may have contracts where their payments are linked to results for some part of what they do. So there's some interesting developments there. Addressing serious youth violence in gangs is a very important part of our role, working with Home Office and Ministry of Justice. There are huge issues here because it is very difficult actually to predict which young people will commit the most serious offences. I think that sounds a bit counterintuitive. Most people think that we should be able to sort of look at the books of the youth offending team and work out which children will do the most serious things. And actually it doesn't work like that. So it is actually quite a complex issue, but clearly involvement in gangs is a very important factor. And there's a huge programme of effort going on now across the areas most affected by this, particularly on, from our point of view, identifying children and their siblings particularly, who are starting to be affiliated with gangs and finding ways to support them out of it. At the more serious end, we're talking here about young people in custody, for example, for gang-related offences. There's very often big issues about finding ways of helping that young person, sometimes even relocate with their family. to other areas in order to be able to start new lives. So, because the whole gang culture issue is a very complex one, as you can imagine. The government is also very keen, and so are we, although it's obviously clearly quite complicated issue of how we make the youth custody system more cost effective. We have got the numbers down dramatically, quite dramatically. 50% in 4 years is dramatic. We're now down, not to the number I think needs to be in custody, but getting nearer to it. But clearly the costs are enormous. Sorry about the figures displaced, I don't know how that's happened. You can see the cost of a secure children's home place, about £4,000 a week. There aren't that many of them, but they are expensive because the children in them are very young or have very special needs. But clearly there is an issue about how we can look at the cost of this and also make sure that we get better results, because at these huge costs, 71% of the young people are still reoffending. Now, anyone who knows anything about youth justice is not naive enough to think that you could easily get that percentage down. And it has come down over the last few years, but we need to do much, much more effective work in resettling in people and supporting them, as well as holding them to account, because we've got victims potentially when they leave, and we will make sure that we do everything to improve performance in that area. But some of the young people we're dealing with in custody are extremely damaged young people, and they have enormous needs, and we have to find ways in custody of improving their prospects when they leave. But that, of course, is not the whole answer, because they have to come out, and if they come out and they haven't got a safe place to live, they haven't got a job, if they haven't got personal support, to which the Secretary of State has personally committed himself to much better provision around being met at the gate and then supported, because being met at the gate's no good unless that support continues. Real partnership between community and custody is the answer, and it's quite hard to achieve, as you all know from your own experience. Joining up services across localities is pretty hard work, even when you're trying, and we've been developing resettlement consortia in various parts of the country built around young offender institutions, which are beginning to show really encouraging results, using very much the services of the third sector, the Prince's Trust, the Structural Youth Trust type organisations, accommodation providers, Catch-22, organisations like this who can help us build with local authorities and the young offender institutions the sorts of wraparound services that young people need. Otherwise they go straight back to their offending behaviour. And then just to conclude, the sort of new kids on the block are police and crime commissioners, and I think that this is quite exciting, because these PCCs have potential to really be local figureheads who understand the need to get involved early with young people. They will have responsibility for youth crime prevention, they'll have some funding, they'll have funding for victim support and for community safety. All of these things are about starting early and getting involved with young people, not only concentrating on once they're committing offences, but really getting stuck in early. And we're really optimistic that I think in almost all areas, if not all areas, we can get, and we are working closely with them already, we can get that approach. Finally, the transition at 18 is also a very important part of the youth justice system. As our young people go into the adult, if we haven't managed to stop them offending, if they go into the adult estate in custody, or if they go into the community working with probation, we have to work together, the agencies, to make sure that young person doesn't just fall off a cliff. The youth justice system is much better resourced than the adult one, so youth prevention teams can spend a lot more time with the young person than probation can, and the result of that is that if we don't handle that transition well, young people feel quite abandoned, they are alienated, they don't know how to deal with the adult services. We have to make that transition work for the sake of those young people and also their potential victims. So, huge amounts of work going on in all these areas, and I think encouraging results. The truth is, you can't achieve anything in youth justice, just like every other service, if you don't get all the agencies really working together. I think that's the key to the successes that we've had, but we've still got a very long way to go. Until that reoffending rate comes down to a much lower level than 35%, then I don't think we, or the government, will feel that we're doing our job as well as we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frances. Time for a few questions. prepared to take them. There is a microphone, I hope. Rowan, yes, it's right at the back. Can I just see any other hands apart from having to maybe come right down to the front for the first one, please? I wanted to ask you about children's pigtails, apparently. I'll restrain myself. Can you say who you are, as well as...
My name is Asif Ayub. I'm a councillor at Espelta Borough Council. My question is to you. Thank you. Well, that looks like I appreciate some information I did not know before. And my question is basically based on the fact that I do have like 12 years of FE background as well. And my question is related to the EMA. What do you think the impact of the educational maintenance allowance had on youth crime, for example? The initial reason behind having that was to reduce antisocial behavior, also leading to possibly reduced crime rate within the youth. Also, another second most important reason of having that was to increase the literacy level within our young and also within our general population. As you know, approximately, I think about 50% of our population is considered to be illiterate really in that respect, that they've got lower achievement rates in English and maths. Now, as you know, recently...
Sorry, can I ask you to come to the end of your question so you can get up and join us?
So I just want to know the impact of basically making it more restrictive and removing it in some cases.
Okay. I think that is a very relevant question in the context of what I said about the importance of what we call this as a term, resettlement, which really means making sure that children have got something constructive to do, education, training, in a job, in an apprenticeship, somewhere to live that's satisfactory and so on. I'm not aware of any research evidence that says taking away the education maintenance allowance has had X, Y, or Z effect. Anecdotally, we know, for example, the riots report last year showed that anecdotally that information from young people was that it was a cause for concern, that it made them feel that they had less prospects and so on. I think the main issue is how you get each individual child, young person, who's on or around the youth justice system, as opposed to young people generally, how you make sure that whatever it is that it takes for them to get back into school or training or college happens. Education maintenance allowance may be relevant to that, but actually what has to happen is a complete sort of wraparound package. I'm not trying to avoid your question, because the truth is I don't know. Clearly, it's certainly nice to have. Whether it's a fundamental thing, I really can't comment on that. I do know that you have to really focus on the individual needs of the young person, and that is not always happening. That's the responsibility, obviously, of the local authority and its partners, youth offending team. It's quite hard to achieve, but certainly support as a child is trying to go on through the system. Being given opportunities, young offenders struggle enormously to get opportunities because of the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act. So there's other issues. Also, I have to say, and we say this to government, that it's not been decided yet what to do, but speculation that young people between 16 and 25 won't get housing benefit is a real concern to me, because many of these young people, going to home to your parents does not have any sense. There is no sense in that for many children in the justice system. I regularly meet children in prison who've got a father in prison, a mother in prison, and 2 siblings in prison. So, there is no home to go to for these children. And that's an extreme case, but, it's not uncommon. And I think we have to think in each case, every social policy change we make, we have to think about how that will affect the most challenged young people. Because not only will they not succeed in their lives when they deserve to, if they're given half a chance, but they will create victims, and sometimes serious victims. So those decisions about allowances, housing benefits, and so on, always have to be weighed up from 2 sides.
Thank you. Other questions? I will ask you then. Oh yes, there is one there.
Good morning. Bill Willis from Kent Place. You mentioned in your answer there about the young people not necessarily having a home to go to, and also a new demand to deal with serious violence and gangs. Nationally, are you seeing any increase in activity in more rural areas that traditionally didn't suffer from gang-related violence? I ask it because within Kent we find a lot of people who are in care are placed into Kent out of London on the assumption that you move them from the area that they are causing the problem, you then solve the issue, and actually you just then move the issue rather than solving it. I was interested, you know, nationally any issues around that, and if there is, what's been done about it?
Yeah, well, there aren't any simple answers to any of the questions, are there? I think, obviously, the focus of a lot of the work, youth offending team level and probation level, is in the big metropolitan areas, obviously. But we do increasingly find that there are issues in a wider variety of areas as well. One of the things that is crucial is that each, as you well know in your role, is that each area really understands its own area, what's happening in its own area. And one of the things we're really concerned in, and working quite hard with NOMS and MOJ and Home Office on, is about the ability to have information which can be transferred. I mean, we have young people who have gang affiliation in all parts of our secure estate. We need to know, absolutely have to know about their gang affiliation, otherwise we can't keep them safe. We also find information that we need to pass on to other agencies so that when they leave, or even while they're in custody, that information is more widely shared. And that's really complicated. I don't think we are, as groups of agencies, dealing well enough with that at the moment, and I think that's recognised. So that's for us, that's a major focus. Because if the information is available and shared appropriately, then it's much more possible for each local area to manage the situation and to work out what plans they have for, you know, actually improving the situation and dealing with gang issues. Dealing, obviously, strongly with those who are committing offences, but really crucially, working with young people who can be removed from that, not necessarily physically removed, but actually removed from that relationship, which is going to damage their whole future life. So, you know, I think the whole joint work and information sharing is the biggest issue for us.
Thank you very much, Francis. I suspect this won't be the only time when we hear that partnership is part of the game. Thank you.